Install permanent LED holiday lights? I can do that. What could possibly go wrong? Hi there. In this video, I'm going to walk you through my approach and experience as a lifelong do-it-yourselfer of me installing permanent LED holiday lights on my house. I'll share some danger, as you saw in that introductory video, of me almost falling off my house, and some of the frustrating glitches and gremlins I had along the way. My goal and my hope is that you'll get a sense if this is the type of project you want to take on and tackle yourself, as I don't think it's for everybody. This is a big, meaty project, and there's a hefty learning curve. Lots of options, and everything is customized to your situation. Well, there are some kind of kits that you can buy, like Govee is pretty popular. And there are companies that specialize in installing these, like Everlights is popular in our area. However, to do your whole house, this would be very expensive, like thousands of dollars, $5,000 to $9,000 probably, depending on the size and how much of your house you want to do. Let's dig in and go over to my project board. I thought I'd share my planning board with you, which I set up in Miro, and it's a great tool for project planning like this, and it's free. Okay, as you can see, there's a lot going on in this Miro board. I promise not to go through this whole thing with you, just some of the highlights. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can dive into it more if you want. There's a lot of good stuff in here. First, I'll orient you to the board. I did some project planning over here around what my goals were, what the house size were, some measurements I needed. I did a lot of research, figuring out where the different YouTube channels were and where the knowledge bases were. I identified the tools that I was going to need along the way, and I identified the parts list, tracked some pricing. Over here is all the wiring and power planning, power calculations and things like that to hook up the lights that I decided to go with. The installation phase, and of course the WLED software and how to use that and configure it for my specific home. And then I did some of the smart home integration stuff where I use Homebridge and HomeKit to do some of the integration into my HomeKit. So first off, choices. I had to do some research. So I did lots of research. There's plenty of good YouTube channels out there. Some of the good ones are Intermittent Tech, Dr. Z's, The Hookup. These are kind of the main ones that people go to and gravitate to. And there's Facebook groups out there for like Dr. Z's, but you can also get misled out there. So you got to be careful who you ask advice for, and because honestly, it's a lot of novice people helping novice people. And there's some good help out there too, but some of it is not, and you can be led astray pretty quickly. But if you really have a serious problem with something or have some real answers that you need to get, then I recommend going to the Discord channel where Intermittent Tech has a Discord channel and set up with all of the gurus monitoring the space, and really you can get some really good help out there. With all this research, I had to figure out what is it that I want to do, because there's a lot of options to choose from out there. I had to decide what my goals and my outcomes were. There were all kinds of different LED lights. Do I want to do the string pixels, or do I want to do the LED strips? Which light standard do I want to choose? How many lights and LEDs per meter do I want? Do I want to go 5 volt or 12 volt? Do I want to do power injection or not? What's the pros and cons for all of those things? What are the different aluminum channel options that I can choose from? Do I want to do the strip lights with the U shape? Do I want to do them with the V shape? How do I want the lights to flood down my house or point out towards the road so people can see them in a different way? Those are options you have to figure out and look at. You can decide that for yourself and go find those, because there's plenty of YouTube channels out there already for that. But after I did all that research, then I finally decided, okay, I have to decide what I want for my situation, because there's just so many options. And what I had decided was, what are my goals? So I listed what I thought were my goals, which was I wanted a permanent modern LED holiday light that will last at least 5 years with the Pacific Northwest weather, where we get a lot of wet and rain and humidity here. And I wanted minimal maintenance. I don't want to be up on ladders. I don't want to be fixing these things a lot. And I wanted them to look great both during the daytime and at night. So during the daytime, I don't want to have a bunch of aluminum channel that looks funny with lights sticking out and, you know, not blending in with the construction of my home. I wanted it to actually blend into the construction so that you really couldn't see it and it wasn't really obvious. And I also wanted to integrate it into my HomeKit smart home and wanted to make sure I had a foundation then to kind of set the stage for future LED holiday lighting as well. And of course I didn't want to spend a ton of money on this. At first I thought, well, I'll just spend $500, but then once I got into it, I realized, okay, I need to up the budget, and so I upped the budget to $1,000. Well, after all that research and YouTubing and figuring out what my goals and objectives are, I finally had made some decisions, like what direction am I going to go in? And considering the construction of our house, I finally decided I was going to go with the LED strip lights, and I chose the 12-volt version, which is the WS2815. And the reason why I chose those is because a couple of reasons. One is they look great during the daylight. You know, if you choose that and I chose the V-shaped aluminum channel, I could put that up against the gutters of my house in the bottom and it just looked like a nice piece of molding that fit right into the natural construction of the house. And from just a few feet away, you couldn't even tell, honestly, that there was even any channel there. And as far back as just the sidewalk from the house, you literally could not even see them. So that was one thing. It looked natural for me during the daylight, and it didn't look like a bunch of aluminum channels sticking out there with lights sticking out everywhere, which I didn't really like that look of. And the other thing was that it's 12 volt, and as a result of it being 12 volt, there was going to be a lot less power injection wires to have to run. So it's going to be easier for me to install it as well. Kind of a third thing is I was familiar with the LED strip platform. I've done a whole bunch of LED strip lights before inside the house, just never done something like this on the outside. So familiar with it, and it made sense to choose that direction. I also decided to go with a Dig Quad V3 board, which was their latest and greatest Dig Quad board. And the reason why is because, well, quad, it has 4 ports on it that allowed me to have 4 channels that I estimated that I would need to do my whole front of my house, both the first floor roof line and then the second floor roof line as well. I even decided down to the wire color that I wanted, like what color of wires did I want for which section, because I wanted to make sure that blended into the house as much as I could as well. Next, just needed to acquire all the parts and supplies. I began to order. First thing I wanted to order was the Dig Quad because I knew it was deep into November already and Dr. Z's was out of them, and the only place I could find them was on the ChinaNet website, so I went ahead and ordered one of those, and I went ahead and paid the extra expedited shipping as well. And believe it or not, it came pretty fast, pretty reasonably fast. It came in 7 days, 7 total days. That's including weekends and everything. Cost a lot more to get it here, but at least I got it. Because I knew that was one of the things, I had to have that in order to get the rest of it to work or even do any testing at all. I really wish I had begun this project a lot sooner in the year, a lot sooner in the season, like maybe September, early October at the latest, but I'd began it in November, so I was up against the rush with everybody else. So here's a list of the parts that I ordered, and I kept running a tally in my spreadsheet. So here's a short clip of some of the parts as I started getting them in. So just starting off on this end, have the electrical box from holidaykoro.com, and along with that I bought this piece of acrylic plexiglass that I had to cut to size and just rounded the corners so that it would fit inside, so I could attach the power supply and the Dig Quad and all the wires and things to it. Of course, got the power cord, got this little fan vent cover, and I got a smart plug so that I can plug this into, and I can include that into my smart home using Apple HomeKit. I know some people said that we should use the relay option in Dig Quad and be able to have some sort of circuit there to turn it on and off, but I'm not going that route. Got some of these strain relief connectors so I can drill some holes in the bottom of the box and have the wires come out. So that should help clean that up and make that real nice. Of course, got the power supply, standoffs here, and got the 5-volt power supply so I can keep the ESP32 running at all times and turn the 12 volt off. Got the 12 gauge wire so that we can have that connected from power supply to the DigQuad. Got first round of the WS2815 lights coming in, and I got the ferrule crimper, a little ferrule crimper kit. Got this, I think, for like $8 on Amazon. And of course, got the waterproof solder connectors here that melt the solder in the middle in case I need those. And got the marine grade clear heat shrink tubing here. So probably end up using mostly the 3/8 size here. Comes with 10, cut them in half, gives you 20. The channel came in, so I bought the 6-foot channel. It's the V shape, and it came with a lot of these little connectors already in it. I did buy an extra box of them, but I'm not sure I'll need them since it came with so many. I didn't realize it didn't really show that it was going to come with that many when we got them. So that's really the beginning, and now I think I have almost everything I need except the DigQuad, which I noticed is coming in hopefully tomorrow or the next day. I also took inventory of my tools, and as a lifelong do-it-yourselfer, I had lots of tools and miscellaneous supplies already, so I really didn't need a whole lot more, but I did order the things that I thought I was going to need that I didn't already have. Here's a look at just some of the tools that I used. The work belt organizer was really helpful while up on a ladder. And of course, all the soldering tools were super important. The helping hands and needle nose tweezers are essential. As I'm testing and learning, nothing too big. Most people have these. Hot melt glue gun, borrowed from my wife. Here's my solder setup I've been doing for all my testing and practicing and things like that. Flux is your friend, I found. I just don't feel like this rosin core. Get it to focus there. Fine solder, 60/40 tin to lead. Has enough rosin in it for me. Maybe I'm not fast enough, I'm not sure, but extra flux works really well. It does make a mess, so you kind of have to clean it up a little bit. Use my toothbrush for that. But here's where I've been practicing, making all my wire connections and whatnot, and you can see that it's starting to get pretty good. After just a few rounds of doing this, is kind of my whole string I've been putting together, and it's coming together pretty good. The next step was, once I had all the parts and the supplies coming in, the next thing I really had to do was planning out the LED strip assembly. So figuring out the LED strip lengths and wire runs was a really important part of this phase of the project. So I knew exactly how to put it all together and so that it all worked the way I intended it to work. This is also where I kind of had to dust off some of my knowledge of low voltage electricity to understand like volts, amps, watts. Things like volts times amps equals watts, along with trying to remember what the difference between resistance, continuity, and ohms are. Those are all electrical terms that kind of come up throughout this part of the project so that you can calculate power that you need to ensure that you have the right power injections that you need, the power electricity flow and everything for the lights to work the way they are intended to. I found a really good WS2815B specification sheet, which I'll share in the link below. This was super helpful. It identified all of the electrical needs and power requirements all the way down to what each pixel, like amp requirements and watt output were, so I could use that in the power calculations needed. Once I had sort of the exact lengths, the exact number of pixels that I needed in each run, then I used the power calculator to make sure that I had enough power to run the entire length without having to do any power injection. And this is again where the 12 volt power for these types of lights came into play, so that I ended up not having to do a lot of power injection. There was only one run, like 326 pixels, that started to curve a little bit at the end and turned yellow, but honestly, once I did not do any power injection, and once I got it all up and installed, I cannot tell at all if there's any dimming of lights at all at the end of the run, like some of the other lights might have. So that's the advantage of having a 12 volt LED light strip versus the 5 volt. Planning out the wiring chart was also really important to me, so I knew exactly how to assemble them. So I spent some time in the Miro board going over exactly how I needed to wire it from the dig quad to the LED lights and all the way down to the pigtails, to the wire run, to the LED lights. So I had that all figured out, pre-planned, exactly how much I needed. Again, I needed all of that sort of end to end so I could do the power calculations, because the wire runs and everything included along the way, you really need to figure out exactly how long those are, how many pixels they are, things like that, so that you can actually do the power calculations and that it's going to work properly. One thing to note on the WS2815 standard is that it has a backup data wire. So this is another advantage of choosing this standard, was because it has a backup data wire run within the LED strip, which allows that if there's one single pixel that may be malfunctioning, that it won't kill all of the LED lights after that like a lot of the other standards will. It'll skip that and allow the next pixels to be able to work right. But there wasn't an obvious, like, how do I connect this between the dig quad, because I only have one data out, to the data in and the data backup in of the LED. So the LED standard specified that and actually had a diagram in there helping figure out how do I wire that exactly. And what I also ended up figuring out is that the style of lights that I chose is that I could just simply connect a solder bead on the ground to the backup data wire, because that's the specification said that you should connect the backup data connection for the first connection to the ground so that it's not floating, because there's no obvious place to connect it to your controller, in this case the dig quad. So I would just ran a solder bead between the ground and the backup data connection right on the LED strip, and that actually works and gives it that connection that's necessary so that it's not floating. And also, a very important thing I discovered along the way, and I'll talk about that later when I discovered some glitching I had, is that it's really important to not run your data wire in the same wire bundle with a ground wire. There's been discovery along the way, and they've done some studies that show that if you run that data wire in a bundled set along, and it connects along the way over a length of the wire, a certain length, it starts glitching and starts interfering between that data wire and the ground wire. So the best practice is to run a separate data wire. And I actually found that I had that problem on my very first LED run. So I started creating just ran a separate single green data wire along with my other wires outside of the wire bundle. And lastly, I found that it was super helpful to do a complete end-to-end assembly for testing on the ground before you climbed up on a ladder. I did this kind of at every step of the way, from mock-up to every time I did a solder, I would go test it to make sure that connection worked. And then if I added a pigtail later, I'd go test to make sure that connection worked properly. And then once I got it completely assembled all the way end to end, pigtail clear to the wire ferrules that I used to connect to the dig quad, all the way. I had the wire run, the pigtail, the wire run, the LED lights, all the way down to the ferrule connections to the dig quad. I would test that, and I would just let it burn in for like 24 hours, just straight. And I would just run various different effects on it to make sure that there was no anomalies whatsoever. I found that super helpful to make sure that you started off in a really good place on the ground while it's simple, while it's accessible, and you're not up on ladders having to fix connections and resolder joints back together or something like that. Once I finally had a really solid plan of exactly how I was going to assemble all of these, then really came the installation phase. One of the first things I did was, once I have all the parts, including the dig quad that came in, I went ahead and mocked up the dig quad and the power supply and all of that inside the control box that I had. And that's where I honestly discovered the first Gremlin. So I was gonna, per my assembly sort of plan, I wanted to make sure that I had the ability to run a 5-volt connection, a separate 5-volt connection from the dig quad so that it would power on the ESP32 controller by itself and leave it on, but I could then turn off the 12-volt connection to all the LED lights so I'm not just burning up electricity. So I wanted to be able to leave that on and off. So I had the 5-volt connection, but well, the first thing I found was the very first time I went to power up the board, plugged in the 5-volt connection, no power. It's like, well, what the heck is going on here? So through a lot of testing, this is where I used my multimeter. I've used the multimeter a lot throughout this to test things along the way. I was able to see that I was getting like fluctuating voltage coming out of the 5-volt connection using that little barrel connector that came with it that connects to the DID quad. And through that I found, through testing, through continuity testing, I found that the ground there was a problem with the barrel connector. So simply I just cut that out, cut the 5-volt wire and just spliced it directly in and connected it straight to the DID quad, and it started working perfectly. So Gremlin number 1 took a while to figure it out. I bet you I spent 2 hours troubleshooting just that one thing. Not a great way to start off. First thing, won't fire up the board, didn't work, couldn't figure out why, had to get the multimeter out and do some troubleshooting. But that sure helped, figured it out. All right, moving along. So you can also see here was my first mock-up. My first mock-up was where I was able to then put everything together, wired it properly, hooked some LED strip lights to it, got it all working, connected it to WLED, got that working. So I knew I had at least that phase working well. So the next step was then just to, once I had the wire assemblies put together and had a final like end-to-end wire assembly ready to go, the next step was installing the first LED strip onto the first segment of my house. My goal was really to do the first floor first before I started tackling the second floor, because I wanted to be able to, if something went wrong, be able to access it easier, where I was just up on a single ladder maybe, and didn't have to like be up on my first floor roof line accessing the second floor strip. So I wanted to do it where it was simpler and easier to get to. So the first approach was to start with the first floor roof line, test and learn and make sure everything was working properly before I proceeded to the next roof line. Here's some video clips of me installing the first LED strip. All right, one last thing, had to check it out. Wanted to make sure the light still worked, that we had Wi-Fi connection over here. Everything's good, should be fine. Have one of my access points pretty nearby. Figured it would all work, but had to hook up a string of these lights to make sure everything still worked like it was supposed to, and it looks like it's working just fine. Not really recorded much of it, but I got the channel installed all along this edge here and clear down the edge there. So next steps are just really to wire all the LED together, the wire on the LED, and then poke a hole there, kind of a hole already there, and install it from there. Finally install day, and got the wire poked through the garage, coming out there, and just rewired it, and again testing again for the millionth time just to make sure everything works. So I'm gonna let that burn in for a little bit, make sure everything still works the same. Just a little better view here coming out of the wall. Got it going up in there. I'm gonna make it nice and neat and tidy up in there, come down there, and then paint the wire. That lets me go right into that channel right there, which will put around the corner and go all the way down to the other end, all in one long contiguous string. So once these have a chance to kind of burn in for a little bit, then we'll proceed to the next steps of putting the 3M tape in there and then sticking these things down. See how this goes. One tip I'll add in here is I ended up using a spring punch to help start the little channel bracket screws. They were just really tiny screws, and once you're up on a ladder and you're trying to hold things together with the with the channel, and you got a bracket, and you've got a cordless screwdriver and a little tiny screw, it was really hard to kind of get that started properly. So first thing I did was I put everything up, connected where I wanted it roughly, and then I used a little spring punch and just spring punched the holes there. It made it so that when I was putting one screw on the end of the screw gun and screwing it in, that it had a place to guide it, and it made it so much easier. Otherwise, I kept trying to get it to screw in, and the screw would slip off the end of the tip, and it would be really frustrating. So once I did that, it went a lot smoother. So finally, I got the first LED strip light up on the house, and it worked. It was working good for a little while, maybe a whole day. But here's where I introduced Gremlin number 2. And just out of the blue, again, I tested all this stuff on the ground every step of the way. Tested, let it burn in for at least 24 hours. Had a full end-to-end light strip from pigtail to the LED lights to the pigtail to the wire run, all the way down to the dig quad. Complete end-to-end assembly. Tested. Worked flawlessly in the garage for 24 hours. I get it up on the roof line, install it, got it in the channel, got the diffusers back on, and it's working, and I'm celebrating and patting myself on the back for a success, finally making progress. And out of the blue, the thing starts glitching. Don't know what changed, don't know what happened, but through a whole lot of testing for the next couple of days, it took quite a bit of testing to try different wire runs and different things like that. This is where I discovered that running that green data wire in the bundle pair, or in the bundle, in a wire bundle, caused some of that anomaly, because it happened over the length of the wire. And again, it's really inconsistent about when it happens. It can happen or it may not happen. So what I found was I just had to run another data wire run from the dig quad. I ran a two pair, just a positive and a ground, and then ran a separate data wire outside of that and just taped that data wire around that bundle on the outside and ran that out there, and that worked. So, all right, lesson learned, figured that out. Didn't know that was the best practice, but I found out along the way. And once I did that, then I went back and I redid all my other wire assemblies that I had created as well. So went back and recreated them with separate data wires. Had to order new data wire, took some time to get that in, and then had to redo them, and of course then retest all of the bundled, all the different wire assemblies again, end to end, so that I knew everything was working properly. Okay, once I had the first segment up, finally got through all the troubleshooting and got that Gremlin behind me. No problem, that's fine. Lessons learned, move forward. On to the second line. So I got this second LED run in and tested, and again, working great. It was really well. I was very happy. This completed both my the first run and the second run, and it did my first floor roof line kind of end to end, and I was like super happy I finally got that done. And it was a chance then for me to like celebrate and like, all right, success. I finally made some progress here, got it working. Everything seemed to be working well. Got a chance to play with the WLED software and figure out things like segments and how to play with the effects and what the different effects and segments did and all things like that. And that it worked great for like 3-4 days. And then just out of the blue, it started glitching, kind of like what the LED first run was doing. Even though I had run the separate LED or data green wire outside the wire bundle. So there was something going on with that. So I literally spent 3 weeks, like almost every single day, doing something to try and figure out what is going on with this LED run. I would do something, I would test it, it would work. Sometimes it would work for hours and it'd start glitching, and sometimes it would work for days and it would start glitching again. So every time I thought I had it fixed by going up and maybe resoldering an LED segment that I thought maybe there was a bad segment, so I'd take out a segment and put in another segment up on ladders soldering. By the way, you can see a clip here of how I did that. It's kind of hard to solder on ladders, but I figured out you just got to get comfortable with it. And so this is sort of how I did it, with creating a little bracket to allow myself to solder flat and not have to solder in a sort of a vertical way. Anyway, back and forth, and I went out to the Intermittent Tech Discord channel, got some really good people out there trying to help me, telling me I'm doing all the right things and providing some guidance on what to try and test for, and I did all those things. I did everything I could think of. I was so frustrated because it would like work for like days, like I said. It would work days and continue to like work properly, and then I think I had it fixed, and then all of a sudden it would start glitching again. So the last straw was I had gone up and had rewired the very first segment where it connected the pigtail to the LED strip, and replaced about 3 feet of that LED segment where I thought maybe there was some pixels or maybe some circuitry in the first part of the LED strip that was bad. I replaced that entire segment, that entire pigtail, sort of like that whole assembly. And lo and behold, it worked for about 5 days. And that was it. I just had enough. This had been going on for 3 weeks. I'm like, all right, this is the last ditch effort. I'm gonna try this. And if that doesn't work, I'm ripping the entire segment down. And so I got frustrated. I went up and I ripped that entire segment down. And I gotta tell you, a 3M tape works good because I had a hard time getting it out. Actually had to use some heat to kind of heat it up a little bit to get it back out. And just some brute force just to kind of rip it out once I got it started. So I ripped that entire segment out. Didn't care if I was breaking it. I was going to throw the whole thing in the trash and just wire up a brand new segment, test it end to end again. And that's what I did. So created an entire new segment, ordered some new wires, ordered some new LED strips, got it in, soldered it all together, was super, super careful about everything from heating up the heat shrink, making sure I didn't overheat the segments around it and maybe ruin some sort of circuitry in the board, to making sure every single solder joint, every single solder connection was perfect. And then I tested it for 48 hours end to end straight in the garage. No like break, just making sure I tested it, tried all kinds of different effects and different presets that I had set up. And it worked great in the garage. So finally, I went back up, put some new 3M tape back in the channel, cleaned it all up, put it all back up there, went up a lot faster the second time, put the diffusers back in, and went through the process of making sure everything was neat and tidy again. And finally, it's been working fine for like over a month now. So that was a success finally, but that was really enough to frustrate me enough to go, wow, maybe this project is big enough and there's enough problems that go with it. Even though I was super deliberate, super careful in everything I did, this really was, I'm like questioning sort of my own capability along the way as a do-it-yourselfer. Is this something I really should be doing? It kind of affected my confidence a little bit along the way. But we got through that, putting that behind me, trying to chalk it up to lessons learned. Still never learned what the actual problem was. My guess, if I had to guess, is that somehow I might have overheated a segment when I was putting the heat shrink tubing on in between the LED strips that I had soldered together. So that might have been it, although I was being super careful with it. And I used a heat gun that didn't have like super high heat. It took a fair amount of time to heat that heat shrink up so that it would shrink properly. And I even put some like protectors around the heat shrink so that it wouldn't heat the areas around it. I think maybe that's what might have happened. Was I think I might have like overheated a segment, and maybe some of the circuitry in the board inside the LED strips might have gone bad, and that caused the glitching and the weirdness. So on to the second floor now. So enough time had gone by with all that troubleshooting from the first floor activity. I'm already into December, so it's starting to get cold and we're having some weather issues where it's snowing and freezing and raining. So I had to find sort of some windows to get out and do the second floor. That's why I really recommend doing this project earlier in the year when you have a little better weather and where supplies are more readily available for it. And I knew this was going to be a lot sketchier because it was on a second floor, and I had my first floor roof line stick out a little bit, so I had to put ladders on top of the first floor roof line to get to the second floor peaks, which you can see in this picture what I'm talking about here. And I knew it was going to be pretty sketchy, so I did make sure I had some safety in mind, and did go out and put my safety harness on and make sure that I was trying to be as safe as I could. And I'd done this before. Actually, I had done this like a year before, where I painted my whole house, and I was up and down the ladders and on the roof line and painting trim and doing this exact same thing. And I got actually pretty comfortable with it. I don't really have a fear of heights, but it is sketchy. And if I did fall, it would be catastrophic. So I didn't want to die from this project. So I put my safety harness on just as an extra safety precaution. I'm so glad I did too, because as you saw in the introductory video, you could see that I actually fell. The ladder had slipped. And that sort of is my fault to some degree, because I did use a ladder that really wasn't made for that. Not that any ladder's really made for it. I don't think there's any OSHA approved ladders that say this one's approved for this sketchy situation. But I do believe that this ladder was especially not the proper ladder to be using up there. And I had not used it before. It was just a little bit taller than my other ladders, so I could reach to the very, very top peak without getting too far up on the ladder. And but it slipped, and you can see here what had happened in the video. And had I not had my safety harness on, I think this would have been a pretty catastrophic day for me and my family. Because as the ladder fell, hit the ground, you can see my security camera caught this. The way the ladder fell, I probably would have cracked my head open. It would not have been a good day. So there's a lot of danger, I think, here, and super glad and thankful that I decided to put my safety harness on that day. But also, I learned from that too. It's like, all right, I need to use the proper ladder, and I need to secure the ladder so that it doesn't slip. And so I came up with this scenario, looking at how I might be able to secure the ladder so it doesn't slip. I put the 2x4 inside the windows of the second floor and strapped the bottom of the ladder to that, and so that I made sure that it was super secure. It was not going anywhere and not going to slip again. So between my safety harness and that, I felt super rock solid. Those ladders were really, really solid in place. And every time I had to move them, it was a pain in the butt to move the straps over and get them secure again. But I did that out of extra abundance of caution, because that actually kind of scared me. I don't want to fall off my roof. I don't want to die putting LED holiday lights on my house. And also, from the lessons learned I took from the first floor, the second floor went fairly smoothly after that ladder slip incident. Got the channels up, wiped them out, put the 3M tape in place, put the LED strips in there. My planning was perfect. I had the exact wire runs, the exact number of pixels, the exact length between the two peaks of wire that I needed. It absolutely was, the calculations was essential. And so all that planning up front worked out perfectly. Every single pixel fell into its place where I wanted it. All the wires went where I wanted them to. I was able to connect them up, secure them to my house, and make it all super nice and neat and tidy. And then finally, the last thing was like just to make sure everything was all cleaned up. Had some wire grommets I put on there to connect the wires and get them fully out of the way. Some touch-up paint that I did to paint some wires that maybe were a little bit more exposed. Zip tied everything to make it all nice, neat, and tidy, and make it look really good, and made it all the way from inside the garage wall down to the dig quad control box. Made that all a nice little wire harness all the way down there. So there was just a lot of cleanup work after that. So finally, I got it all installed. Got the first floor, got the second floor, no glitching on the second floor, just a little danger all along the way. Thank God I had my safety harness on. Once I had all the LED lights and strips installed properly, it was onto the software side of things. I had already installed WLED. I'm not going to go into great detail. There's plenty of YouTube videos out there where people go into how to set that up and how to use it. I had a chance to then integrate all of this into my smart home stuff as well. I have both Homebridge and I have HomeKit that I use. I don't use Home Assistant, not yet. I might someday. But right now I'm using Homebridge and I'm using HomeKit exclusively. And I've been doing that for about 5 years. So there is a Homebridge plugin. It's called Simple WLED. It does allow you to connect that on Homebridge, which then integrates a sort of a non-compliant HomeKit compliant product into HomeKit. And so it does integrate that. You just have to configure it, put the IP address in there, put the different effects that you're allowed to have. And from within HomeKit, then you can turn it on and off. You can change different effects and things like that, but you can't change the presets in that plugin. So that's kind of a problem because I had set up all my presets just exactly the way I wanted them, with all the different effects and colors and all different segments that I had set up and things like that. So there really was no plugin that worked with segments, or there was really no plugin that worked with presets. So I had to go out and figure out alternatives for that, and what I found is that the WLED has the HTTP API commands that you can send it. So I went out, studied that. There's a link to it down below where you can go out and look at the HTTP API commands and identify ways that you can turn the lights on and off. You can select different presets. You can send it different commands, like I want them all to be red, I want them all to be blue, and I was able to, from there, set up sort of the Siri shortcuts on my iPhone, and then I integrated those into my HomeKit. So things like I have, for example, a touchdown preset that I have that basically turns on a touchdown preset for my house that celebrates the colors of my football team and kind of flashes them around and everything, and it goes for like 60 seconds, and then it turns it back off and goes back into its normal default preset. So I did all of that with the HTTP API commands, and they're fairly simple to set up. There's really good examples out there, and that's a great way of going as well, because you can do pretty much anything you need to that I wasn't able to do without that. So wrapping it all up, I hope that you got out of this video what I had set out for my goal to be, which was for you to decide for yourself, is this a project as a do-it-yourselfer that you feel like you have the skills and experience and desire to want to go do and climb up on ladders and all the stuff that goes along with that, and experiencing the glitches along the way, because you will experience them. Just about everybody in all the forums I've talked with also have similar experiences to have some glitches. They're just gremlins. Sometimes they just crop up, and you just got to learn as you work through them. Is that worth it to you? And hopefully you got a sense for whether or not this will help you decide that or not for yourself. For me, it's all said and done. Of course, now I'm done. It's working well. I'm loving it. It's great. And I'm glad I did it. I think I would do it again, even knowing what I know now, just because I really enjoy it, and it's really part of what my goals and aspirations were to do with the LED holiday lighting. So for me, I would have to answer it as I would do it again, and it was worth it in the end. And hopefully they will stay that way, and no other gremlins come up for the next few years, and that they're just going to stay rock solid, and then I don't end up with a bunch of gremlins I have to go chase and get back on ladders for. So time will tell. Hopefully not. But if you did like this video, I really ask that you give it a like. And if you like this type of do-it-yourself type of video as well, I'd ask that you consider subscribing. Heck, you can always change your mind later. All right, thanks a lot, and good luck with your projects.